All right. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the meeting of the Temple City Council to conduct a workshop. It's August 5th, 2021. The time currently is 2:35. Item 1 is public comments. Anyone wishing to speak on any matter before the council during this on this workshop agenda may do so, as long as you've signed up prior to this meeting. Public comments will be received during this time. Please limit those comments to 3 minutes. Mr. Janczak.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yes, sir.
Chava had their annual golf tournament at Salmon's on Friday the 23rd. And I just would like to relate to you that Matt and his crew were absolutely superb. It could not have been a better event. We had 130 golfers. They provided food, both lunch and dinner. And the carts were exemplary and clean. And we couldn't be happier. And you all need to know that. You just did a great job.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Janczak. Moving on to item number 2, which is the work session. We will discuss as maybe needed in the regular meeting agenda items for the meeting posted for Thursday, August 5th, 2021. It looks like, based on my notes, that we're going to table item M on the consent. Let me get there. We'll plan on tabling item M.
And with item M, Mayor, we just needed more time to evaluate our approach and evaluate our approach and how we want to move forward with procuring our electricity.
Okay. Be seen on a later agenda.
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good. All right. Council, is there anything else that you would like to discuss either on the consent or on the regular agenda? Well, Councilmember Williams, you've got one.
Yes.
I believe. Before we get into that, is there anything else? No? All right.
I'd just like to have a presentation on item N.
Okay. Ms. Davis, I believe you're ready for that presentation.
Item N on your consent agenda is for the creation of the land committee. It's a resolution that actually does, I'm gonna take this off because I know my voice generally doesn't carry. It's a resolution that does 3 things. The first thing is to create a land committee, which is intended to oversee the purchase of land for economic development purposes. And then it authorizes a Chapter 380 economic development agreement to fund the purchase of multiple properties within the city or the ETJ for economic development purposes. And it also amends existing EDAs to allow the TEDC to retain the proceeds from the sale of land funded by those agreements and to deposit those funds also into the land bank account.
Go ahead.
Okay. Okay. All right. So the land bank, the land committee creation. If you recall, on May 20th, the council approved the project plan amendment. And part of that was to create a land and right-of-way acquisition program. To support the land and right-of-way acquisition program, this resolution will create the land committee. The point of the land committee is to go out or to recommend to the TEDC to purchase land to make shovel-ready land available for economic development negotiation purposes. Shovel-ready is intended to include both the purchase of land and the development of that land. And then in order to facilitate the land and right-of-way acquisition program, the land committee is proposed to be created to oversee the purchase of those properties. The land committee's role, well, first, the membership is made up of the mayor, the city manager, the TEDC president, the TEDC chair, and the RZ finance committee committee chair, and the committee may bring in other experts as needed for their assistance and advice. And the land committee's role is to review and make recommendations to the TEDC board regarding all land purchases to be funded or partially funded with money that's provided under this resolution, and or with proceeds from the sale of land that's purchased with these funds. So it includes land that's purchased with the roughly $11 million that's being provided under this agreement, as well as down the road when those properties are eventually sold, the proceeds from if they're using, funds from the sale of those lands, then it also applies to those funds as well. That makes sense. If a majority of the land committee does not recommend approval, then the TEDC may not use these funds to purchase the land. There is a sunset review provision that will occur at least every 5 years, and the sunset review will be accomplished by the council. If they choose to complete the sunset review more often, council may do that. And at a minimum, the council will look at the land committee membership, the duties, the responsibilities, and the funding. And by funding, that also includes the amount of the land bank account funds. So at that point, if the way that the fund is growing, if the balance is, in council's opinion, too large at that time, if if you think that the proceeds sales of land in the future would be better used by coming back directly to the RZ and not going back to the TEDC land bank account at that point, then you can make those changes. Also, I think the most important provision to remember is that council has the authority at any time by a majority vote to terminate this agreement and terminate the land committee. And at that point, all of the funds will be returned to the city for deposit back into the RZ account. The initial funding is approximately $11.4 million. $5.6 million is available immediately upon execution of this agreement. $1.1 million will be available after the completion of an impending land sale, and the remaining $4.7 million will be available on October 1st. The way that these funds can be used is very specific. It's to purchase land either within the city limits or to purchase land in the ETJ if the land is contiguous to the city limits for annexation purposes, or if it will be contiguous by the time the economic development prospect receives a certificate of occupancy. So the point is that this money can only be used to buy land that's either can immediately be annexed into the city, or that the intent is that in short order it will be, such as if it's one parcel that's part of a larger area of land that's being put together. And so if this piece comes in before another piece that's needed to make it contiguous, but the intent is that all of these parcels are being purchased and will be part of a larger parcel which is contiguous, and then will be eligible to be annexed. So the intent is not to use these funds for land which will never be contiguous to the city and never subject to annexation. Also, the funds must be used in accordance with Chapter 311 of the tax code, which is where the RZ provisions are found. And upon acquisition of a property that's in the ETJ, TEDC will immediately pursue voluntary annexation if it is contiguous. And if it's not contiguous and cannot be annexed at that time, when the TEDC transfers that property to an economic development prospect, it will be under the condition that they either complete an annexation process that has already begun, or that they proceed and request voluntary annexation at the earliest opportunity. The funds that are provided under this agreement will be deposited into and maintained within a separate account, and TEDC will provide a quarterly accounting of all disbursements and receipts into and from the account. And then if TEDC sells property that was purchased with land bank funds, then the proceeds from that sale will also be deposited back into the land bank account. There are 4 resolutions that you have passed in the past year or two about the sale, either where we provided funding for TEDC to purchase land, or we transferred land to TEDC that we already own. And as part of that economic development agreement, they were, TEDC was required to, if they ever sold that property, any proceeds would be returned to the city for deposit into the RZ fund. So as written, this resolution would supersede those 4 resolutions, definitely. And if those 4 pieces of property are sold in the future, this resolution as written would allow the TEDC to maintain those profits and also deposit those profits into the land bank account. And that's Synergy Park, which was just almost 114 acres. It was transferred to TEDC. Site 64, which is a 1 acre and a 5 acre tract. The Pockman property, which was just under 74 acres south of Industrial Boulevard, that TEDC purchased with $1.48 million that we did provide to them. And the Burn tract, which was 146 acres, also in the industrial park, which we provided $3.69 million for TEDC to purchase that property. And I'll be happy to answer questions. Oh,
Quick question, Kathy.
yes.
You mentioned on the last bullet, any profits from the sale of those or any proceeds from the sale of any one of those
It's
properties?
proceeds.
Okay.
Yes.
So assuming that the Synergy Park is worth some amount of money as is Site 64. So in addition to the 11 million in cash, once those transactions in some way are sold, that'll be another 5 to 7 million that goes in the land.
Yes.
I appreciate your presentation. I know it's on a fairly short notice. I asked for this from the aspect that I am in total agreement with the land bank. It's been explained and been discussed. I think the membership, I think the idea behind it, there were just some items in it that I needed a little bit better explanation on. One of them is on the shovel-ready component. I've heard, although it is only stated in the agreement, the zone's plan calls for shovel-ready sites, but discussion about who might be paying to make the track shovel-ready. Is that actually addressed in the agreement specifically?
No, there is just a reference to shovel-ready sites, and the intent was that it would be discussion by the land committee and by the TEDC board at the time as to who would pay those development costs to make it shovel-ready. I think the intent is that when the land bank grows, that at that point, those funds would be used to assist the city to make those parcels shovel-ready.
So in other words, instead of it being a function of or a cost of the investment zone / city, TEDC would use the city's money to do those shovel-ready improvements or provide the funding. They don't actually do the engineering or the
Correct, I think, yes,
Well,
in the future, yes. please.
yeah, well, and that's not the intent that they would, that money would be scraped from TEDC to, just automatically to pay for those, to make that piece of land shovel-ready. The intent is that if the RZ doesn't have funding for it, and if the city doesn't have funding for it, then that TEDC, those profits, quote unquote, could be used. The land bank balance is not the sacred cow that can never be touched. If everyone agrees, which would be the TEDC, the RZ, and the city, that it's appropriate that funding come from the land bank in order to make those sites shovel-ready to prepare for an economic development prospect, then that money is accessible.
But whatever those three groups do or do not agree to could be overridden by the city council, just saying, send somebody back.
I think that's part of the sunset review,
That can only be done every 5 years, or that can be done.
or as needed.
That's what I thought.
Yeah,
was
yeah, a minimum. You have to review it every
Yeah,
5
it
years.
has to.
Yes,
It can be at any time.
Yes, sir.
Those are the only other agreements that proceeds are gonna stay with TEDC instead of something coming to Temple, right?
Those are the four that I am aware of. So when I talked to Adrian about this, because originally I was going to include those four specifically, he said when he started looking at the map that there were little, there were parcels here and there that have historically been transferred back and forth between the city and the TEDC. And then he said some of them, they're way before his time and may or may not have ever been subject to ever an agreement, or one that we would have to go and I guess research every parcel to see what the history of it was. So what he requested and the way that it's written in the agreement is that if it's land that is located within the industrial park, within Synergy Park, or within the corporate park, and it is intended for industrial development, that the sale of those parcels, that the proceeds are to remain in the land bank.
Is there anything magical about the 5-year minimum review?
I don't think so. I don't think
Thank you
so.
very much.
Sure.
I appreciate it.
To speak to those other properties, they are, we do a reconciliation with TDC each year for their audit report, and they're listed in their audit report too. Which
Even
means
those small properties like,
anything that's been transferred back and
Oh,
forth from
okay.
the city,
yeah, I got you.
we reconcile that with the, and it's disclosed in their notes to the financials.
And everyone is happy. Ms. Bernard, this is directed at you mostly. Everyone is happy with the reporting mechanism between TEDC back to the city.
Related to this
Getting-
agreement,
Yeah,
yes,
because there's enough teeth in it that we continue to fulfill our responsibility.
yes.
Council, any other questions on this? Mr. Williams?
No.
All good?
Fine.
Okay. All right, let's move on to item number 2, which is to receive a presentation on the 87th Texas Legislative Session from Ms. Myers.
Thank you, Mayor, and actually, I am not going to give it. We have the pleasure of having our legislative consultant team here, or one of our representatives. And so Kurt is going to give us an update on both the regular session that wrapped up in a few months ago, and the special session that is wrapping, and then one that's going to start again.
Thank you, Madam Manager. Appreciate
I've
the
never been
opportunity.
called that.
It's wonderful to be here. Nice to be in Temple once again, other than just going up and down 35. And I appreciate the opportunity to present on behalf of my firm, Focused Advocacy, which Brandon Agamay and Snapper Carr, and keeping myself and others make up our firm. And we're very pleased and honored to have helped represent the city of Temple through the manager and her staff's leadership and y'all's direction for the last legislative session, which I'm going to start calling the session that will never end. This is reminiscent of 1989 and 1990, when we had special sessions out the wazoo there. So today I'll talk a little bit about the 87th, because it seems like it was a long time ago that this occurred, given the facts and circumstances that we have going on down there in Austin, and given the continued pandemic issues that have come about. So I'm going to move through this, give it a few minutes, and if y'all have any comments or ask questions, if you want to hold them till the end, is that what we talk about briefly. But if something just pops out, just holler at me. I can usually answer. I'm going to start here just a little bit with our Temple delegation. because we work really closely. The good news is y'all have done your homework and your background on having good relationships with these folks going forward. That's not always the case with some of the cities that we represent. But Temple has done very, very well with Don Buckingham, with Representative Shine, who I just got off the phone with a few minutes ago, told him I was in his neck of the woods and wanted to make sure that he was okay with letting me in the city. But anyway, you and I served together, as both of our pictures will show, a long time ago. So Hugh does a great job. He's a real pro. And Senator Buckingham, I'm sure y'all have all heard, she's announced a campaign for higher office, which would be the general land office. And she's seeking the Republican nomination for that office going forward. So you'll have a new senator, and that seat will be open. And I'll talk a little bit about redistricting later, but redistricting is going to have a lot of impact on when people announce for which office and at what time, because districts can and will change. Just wanted to go back and show, and y'all should be proud of your work. I'm holding the copy of the state legislative program that y'all did. Very, very good. And it also gives us a good roadmap on how we help lobby and persuade, discuss, and educate on y'all's behalf with the legislature. So those items that you see there, think about those as we go through some of these bills that I'm going to talk about here today. And I won't get into all the minutia, but I'll try to give you a flavor of kind of each one of those categories as we go through the presentation. Interesting part of this session, what were the drivers of the session? Always leadership priorities has a lot to do with it. I want to talk to you a little bit about what didn't pass, what did pass, and then we'll talk about the special sessions. This session started, I don't know if y'all remember Dennis Bonnen, but he used to be the Speaker of the House and got into a little hot water with some of his members when he was actively trying to work against some of his Republican members. And he decided not to run again. So we started off with a new speaker, and the new speaker is Dade Phelan from the Beaumont area, well-respected member, 4th or 5th term. But we didn't know how Dade, the speaker, would lead, frankly, until you actually get into that position. The COVID-19 had a lot to do with this session and the impact on the session. Usually we have exhaustive interim committee meetings. We have people come and testify. We have a lot of discussion. We have a lot of stakeholder meetings. That didn't happen with the pandemic. It seems like years ago, but if you remember, there were a lot of issues about police and related deaths with protesters, etc. A lot of talk about we were going to have exhaustive legislation on that. It didn't actually come about. The other thing was the presidential election results that occurred last November, and a lot of the election bills that we knew were going to come out of that. And if all that wasn't enough, back in February 14th, 15th timeframe, we have, of course, the winter storm Uri. Heard y'all were talking about electric issues a minute ago, and probably which providers the city might go with, et cetera. Going to be big changes in electric going forward. And then the last thing of the driver is always, what are the priorities of the leadership of the House and the Senate, and of course, the governor. We all kind of thought this wouldn't be such a busy session, but I'm afraid when they were home and on Zoom, they decided to think about a lot more bills to file. So it really wasn't a fall off that much in bills that were filed. I think the important part of this chart is the third and their second from the left, city-related bills introduced. We, TML, and others track these bills as they affect our local governments. 2,200, that's a little less than a third, but that's over 30% of the bills affected cities. More bills are filed that affect cities than any other entity that's down there in Austin. The good news is city-related bills passed is only 249, because usually if they pass the bills, they're not the best bills for us. This session, we actually had some good bills. And when you think about the overall of this session, as we go through this, you'll see local governments fared better than we did in 17 and 19. Governor Abbott, of course, has his priority items, as does every session. He can actually call emergency items too. And what that means is that they can do within the first 60 days of the session. Otherwise, bills have to wait till after 60 days to be brought to the floor. No bills were brought to the floor within the 60 days, but these bills were addressed. Broadband coming out of the pandemic and what we were requiring of people at home to educate their children, working from home, etc. Broadband expansion is a big deal, not only at the state level, but the federal level. The legislature did pass a bill, HB 5, that sets the framework out on how to expand broadband. And in this money that's going to be coming probably in this infrastructure bill and in the two prior federal bills, there's money for broadband here for Texas. The governor also protecting law enforcement budgets. That kind of came out of the George Floyd, et cetera, issue, in that certain cities were allegedly defunding police when they would move around departments, monies, et cetera, 911 or other things. So that led to Senate Bill 23 and HB 1900, which did pass. I'll talk about it here in a minute. Bail reform, you got both sides of that issue. Some people want to keep folks in jail at a greater rate and a pricier exit to get out of jail than others. Bail reform hadn't passed. It hadn't passed in the special session. It will be back up in the next one. Election integrity. This is the one that gets everybody's, this is what everybody's talking about, mainly because the Democrats left the town over it. We'll talk about that here in a little bit too. COVID-19 related liability protections, that did pass. ERCOT, speaking of electricity, I always asked, anybody know who ERCOT was 2 years ago? Sure didn't know what the acronym stood for, but Electric Reliability Council of Texas. But we all found out in February what that was about. So there were several bills on that, billing errors, winterization, and we'll talk about that some too. This is way too busy, but it just kind of shows you what the lieutenant governor wanted when he started the session, what the speaker's legislative priorities. You know, there's some greens that match up there, not in every area. Not that those bills that weren't speaker priorities didn't get attention or didn't receive hearings, but it wasn't of the highest priority. And you may ask why. We have a Republican governor, we have a Republican House, we have a Republican Senate. When you think they would all be aligned on things. But you have to remember the speaker, he's not elected like the governor or the lieutenant governor. Speaker is elected by the members of the House. So that's Democrats and Republicans alike who make up the 150 members of the House. So what he throws out there on the table is his lead stuff, is not necessarily what the lieutenant governor can do with almost a 2/3 margin of the Senate being Republican. And you'll see those that maybe didn't pass for special session items, and you'll see here in a minute that they'll also come back up again. Lieutenant governor, by the way, had 30 priorities, passed 27 of them, which hitting 900 is pretty good. The budget, we all thought the budget was going to be a mess because of the pandemic. Actually, the budget turned out fine, and with as much federal money as they've sent down here to Texas, money really was not that much of a problem this session. Our two big drivers always public education and healthcare, and we actually ended up, I think that 11.6 is actually higher now because of some of the oil prices over the last few months. And there's still about $16 billion of federal that are sitting over there, which the governor addressed part of that today in his proclamation for next session. This is just kind of a synopsis, a little bit of listing of issues that have been around the last 3 or 4 sessions. And we knew we were going to get attention this time. And frankly, local governments over the 17 and 19 session didn't fare too well on some of the items. There's this erosion of local control, the state wanting to tell the local governments what to do, not only on the city level, but the county level, but school district level also, as well as others. The one up here that was on y'all's agenda too is what some people call taxpayer funded lobbying, kind of call it community censorship. But that was one of the lieutenant governor and the governor's big priorities. The bill as filed would have just prohibited basically participating very much in the process. You couldn't hire outside. You were limited to certain parameters in which to go actually talk to the legislature on behalf of the community. Sales tax sourcing, if you'll remember before the session, the controller had come out with some rules. Think about Dell down the street here. It was whether or not to allocate the sales tax to where the order was taken or where the order was delivered. And that bill, I thought would have passed in some form or another, but it didn't. So now we're reverting back to the controller's rules, which take place either the 1st or October the 1st. This one is one that we're continuing to look at as partisan city elections. There's been a move and there were bills filed to have partisan city elections where you declare as an RD and you have primaries, et cetera. And a lot of cities were against that. Preemption bills always are down there. Usually if I get mad at the city and I'm a member of a big association, I go to Austin and I say, I want to stop those local guys from being able to do that. And Senate Bill 14 was a bill that's going to be back up. It didn't go very far, but it did say to cities, you can't mandate employment type of policies to businesses, basically in response to some Austin stuff. This is one that I think will come back, especially now that we've had a spike here in the pandemic, and we're going to see what happens September 1st, I believe, with the governor's orders, but allowing Zoom meetings and teleconferencing. There's actually a bill filed to allow that going forward, just because of the efficiencies of it. I mean, it's really good. You got a lot of city participation, a lot of citizens participation, but that bill didn't pass. The shot clock, when you have to approve a permit or not, there were some changes on that, but it didn't pass. Y'all were talking a little bit about ETJs. There continues to be a move afoot to restrict cities' ability to control what goes on in their ETJs. Short-term rental has always been an issue for the last 3 sessions. Nothing really happened on it. The next one was supposed to be a highlight bill, and it went nowhere. And that was on disaster authority. There was going to be this big struggle between local and state, specifically the governor and the legislature, on who was going to rule during a disaster. So that one didn't pass. This is one that I think is probably going to come back, although it wasn't on the call today. I thought it was going to be there. But it's the 313 incentives, which is a pretty important economic development tool as it relates to communities and their school district and the school district taxes. But there's kind of been this attitude in the legislature among some that they say, we're not going to pick winners and losers going forward. We're not going to do these economic incentives. We don't need them, and we're going to try to limit them. So 313 is set to expire December 31st of 2022, unless the legislature does something. The other preemption, I was talking about employment regulations there. It goes hand in hand with the regulation of state licenses. That one had more to do with like plumbers and electricians. I won't go through every one of these, but in the red, that did not pass, pretty much would line up with what y'all had put in your legislative agenda. In other words, trying to keep the state out of the local businesses. We mentioned licensing, partisan city elections, employment practices, solid waste contracts, and zoning. So those were some big bills that they did not pass. Taxes, really the ones we need to think about. There wasn't any real movement again on Senate Bill 2. The biggest thing and closest thing to it was 1869. And that has to do with certificates of obligations, which financing mechanism that y'all use. And I think very, very shrewdly and very conservatively. But the COs, they wanted to take the COs, put them in the amounts subject to the property tax cap 3.5 as a total. And so now we have certain designated projects, COs, that are named as COs, but they remain there and outside the tax rate calculation. That bill, it's okay. It's not exactly great, but it's CO saying it could have been a lot worse. But there was a lot of work by cities and counties to do that. I mentioned the sales tax sourcing bills that didn't pass there. Really not a lot of impact on taxes this time. These are the bills. Representative Murphy had a bill, and I think what really happened on that bill was it just got too big. And sometimes bills just fall under their own weight and fail under their own weight. And I think that's what happened there. And then from the extension, they just got caught and didn't have time to get that extension done. But like I said, I think that's probably a possible special session item. These bills, they only apply to certain areas of the state, but what these are the defunding police bills, basically aimed at the bigger counties, Harris, Dallas, Marion, Travis, and 11 cities. It's over $250,000. The reason these are concerning to cities the size of, for y'all, about 75 to 100,000 somewhere. Yeah. When they did the annexation bills, they put them at 500. That was the break. The next session, they put them at 0. So usually when they start this type of stuff, they go further down. This one's a little bit different from annexation because it really is aimed at big cities. And I hate to mention my friends in Austin again, but that's where a lot of this came from, even though Austin just really moved budgetary items around. I mentioned the George Floyd deal earlier. They actually met before the session down in Houston, the governor and everybody, and said, we're going to pass some bills on this, but not a lot came out of that. There were some on the chokeholds and things of that nature. There were some movement, but not what I would have thought a lot of people. The land use, these are the areas we really, really need to watch during the interim and during the next session. We did have some successes, and it was mainly because the city manager and her staff's help and with TML and ours and a lot of other folks on a bill by Representative Shine, who I mentioned before, and Kel Seliger, who's a senator from out west up to Amarillo. And it basically allowed, with the annexation law, it's pretty restrictive, but this you can jump a street or a railroad with an adjoining land or with an owner that wants to be annexed. So it gives the city much more flexibility there. We probably can come back with some more even better cleanup of that next session. The ETJs I mentioned earlier. There are a lot of bills, members, when they go down there, they don't leave their day job at home. And some of the representatives are in the apartment business or in the development business, et cetera. And sometimes they have some beefs. I'm talking about the vacant residential buildings with beefs with their local entities, so they try to bring them. Problem is, when they do that stuff, it affects everybody, you know, unless it's just bracketed to that city or directed at that city. Purchasing, these are interesting ones. And I don't know if y'all come across this yet or not, but you may remember over the years, the Israeli purchasing agreement, you know, that if somebody was in opposition of Israel, then you couldn't do certain things in your financing. And this one, Senate Bill 19, Senator Schwartner down the street, it's the firearm boycott. And it's basically a governmental entity can't enter a contract 100,000 or more with a company unless the contract contains a written verification that the company does not have a practice, policy, guidance, or directive that discriminates against the firearm entity. What all this has to do is a lot of the banks have policies now where we're not going to take federal firearm dealers as clients or customers' money. And several big banks, including Wells Fargo, Chase and others, have these type of policies. And it's a problem. I would have thought the banks would kill this, but they didn't kill this bill. Whether on the opposite side or which side of firearms, it does pose problems because a lot of even some of our bigger banks here in the state that don't have these policies, it's tough for them to handle all the financial ins and outs of a city or a local entity banking with them. So that's one you may want to look at. And then on the energy side, it's kind of a flip. It's the, if I'm saying I'm going to be green, I'm not going to engage in fossil fuel investments, et cetera, then it says if they have that policy, you can't do business with them either. And a lot of the investments out of New York and around the country these days are all, they have the environmental, the social, and the governance policies associated with it. And just on regular development, I do a lot of electric stuff. The developers are real concerned about that one right there. Cloud computing, that was a bill that helps us all, I think, on how to keep our information. Just some personnel issues that I want to mention, the paid quarantine leave bill that's out there. That's going to probably come as a cost to some folks if you don't do it already. Public safety, speaking of guns, it's interesting we put it under public safety, but despite law enforcement strong objections to these bills and others, basically we have permitless carry in Texas now. And the thing I think y'all will need to look at, and I know you probably already started looking at it, but there's a great article. TML has done an update on what kind of signs, what you can do, what you can't do within the facility. So I'd urge you to be sure and look at that. And a pretty good winner down there is on the body cameras. Everybody wants body cameras, but no way to pay for it. And we can actually get governors criminal justice grants to get body cameras should the department and the city want to do that. This is the taxpayer funded lobbying bill that we talked about a little bit earlier. The cities, counties, school districts, all those folks, any taxpaying entity was hit with this, but it did not pass. The last bill that was there was a transparency and accountability bill. And that's the one thing is we in local governments all around the state, from school districts to every, you have agendas, it's public. You have an agenda that you pass in public. Everybody gets 3 minutes to talk about it or have their input or talk to their own councilman. So it's really, I would just say it's an attack on local involvement in the process. When a portion of this bill was that if your city manager was going to come down there and testify, she has to get invited. Think about that if we tried to do that here. Special sessions, this one kind of went away tomorrow. Those were the items that the governor had on it. The Senate, so they kind of started out and then they got to the second week and they're already on the election integrity bill. And so then the Democrats who had walked out on a Saturday night in the House to kill this bill, they staged this walkout to go to DC to take their case to DC. Problem was there's not an exit strategy on this. The exit strategy was that Congress was going to pass a voting rights bill up there. I mean, that just wasn't going to happen. And I think the Senate actually leaves town in DC Saturday or Sunday whenever they get the infrastructure bill done. And the House left last week. So everybody's saying now, will the Democrats be back for the next special session? Of course, the Senate had passed all those bills that were on the call. House had taken actions on a lot of them. And some of them they really need to do, like Article 10 funding, because that's the bill that the governor, or he actually vetoed a line item of the budget that pays for the legislature. But when you do that, the legislature actually gets paid because they're constitutional, including their per diem, of which some of the folks that are gone still get per diem. So, but it also kills the lawyers and the division of the legislature that works on redistricting, all your staff, Republicans, Democrats alike. So the Legislative Budget Board is actually going to meet. They were going to meet Saturday. I think they put it to Monday now. That's a group of 5 and 5 House and Senate members, Lieutenant Governor folks, Speaker, that can actually transfer around up to 10% of particular budgets. I think that's what they're going to do because the governor used it as a bluff and the Democrats took the bluff, although nobody won on that one. We'll see what happens. So now, this Saturday at high noon, we'll come back, not only address those items that were on this special session, but we added a few more. And of what we're looking for, property tax relief bills. They're trying to say from funds on hand, you can get some property tax relief to folks. The election integrity bill, because we're not sure about uniform elections. It wasn't in the other one, but it could be moving everything to November because there were bills like that. And also the partisanship deal. The federal relief appropriations, they want to take $10.5 billion. From what I understand, this just came out at, I don't know, 1 o'clock today. But out of that 16 billion ARPA funds, but use it for nurses, vaccines, to continue to fight hospitals, etc. I don't know how it is up here, but in the DFW area, they're paying like $250 an hour, counties for county hospital nurses. And you can't get it. So there's this big war of folks. So hopefully that's going to address that. The next big issue on the education, y'all been watching the state of Arkansas, is whether or not are we going to have face coverings for kids in schools. You can allow school districts to do that or not. Right now, nobody has that authority. City doesn't have that authority. County doesn't have that authority. School districts don't have authority, just the government. And so I'm thinking that was going to be interesting. Primary elections was added because of the fact that we don't have our redistricting numbers. We think, as in, I'm trying to remember last year we did this, we had to move all the elections forward. It was when Ted Cruz got elected. So we expect a third session, if we ever get through this session, and it will be on redistricting. And I thought it was gonna be on all that 16 billion, but now that's only looking like about 5.5 billion if they take the other 10.5 that we just discussed. I think it's important to note these numbers up here. The numbers will come out September 15th is really when the block numbers come out. That's what you need. But Texas did gain 2 congressional seats. Be interesting to see where they put those. And the Senate membership now is going to be 900, estimated 940,000 citizens to 1 senator. That's greater than U.S. senators in a lot of states. It's greater than our U.S. congressional because the numbers go up with the population on the congressional side. Our Senate stays the same. House stays the same. House is 194,000 just for a House district. You know, hopefully y'all will remain the center where y'all choose, but it's pretty nice to be the center of a House district. And congressional 767,000. You know, Mayor, I was going to say they didn't take Abilene Christian with them to the SEC after they beat Texas, but this is what they did last week. We talked about the Big 12 and my old school, Baylor was down there talking, Texas Tech. They really can't do anything about it. But anyway, that was the big subject last week was the Texas exit. So for all you UTers going to the SEC, good luck. All right. Any questions on that? Trying to get Baylor into the theological conference. Go with Wake Forest, Abilene Christian, everybody else. Any questions, suggestions, or anything to think about or talk about?
One thing that I'm curious about is why does the legislature have such a focus on the cities and in an attempt to erode local control? Sometimes I wonder where some of those state representatives come from, if they ever started at the city level and worked their way up. Because I just don't understand the thinking behind that, because if that were reversed and the federal government were doing that to the state, those guys would flip. So what's the?
That's a great question, and I'm gonna give you my shorthand version of the answer is when Hugh Shine and I started in the legislature, now I'm not saying Hugh responds very, very well, don't get me wrong, but members responded to the county judge, county commissioners, city council, and the mayors. I mean, they responded. And that was the mantra of the parties, especially the Republican Party, was local control. And it started changing with the domination in Texas of some of the big cities and the big counties. And as they turned blue, just think up and down a lot of 35 from the valley to San Antonio to Austin, jump up to Dallas, go out to El Paso, you go to Houston. As that occurred, they were losing strength there. And at the same time, they took back over Washington. And so we didn't have the arguments where Washington is doing all this stuff to us. So you take those two things together and you take some of the priorities of the party, Republican Party, which was on the other side. The Democrats were on the other side before. They all wanted state stuff back in the early days. But you take a lot of that together, and then you just take some of the rulings and orders and ordinances that some of the cities have taken that some consider that's not in line with what we do here in Texas. And you kind of put all that together, and then you put it together with, well, a lot of my people don't vote in my primary. I'm gonna go with those folks that vote in the primary. And sometimes that doesn't exactly go with what local government folks want. That's my perspective of it. I think it's pretty close to it. Now, in the future, And what we tried to do, and what y'all have done such a great job, and what we try to advocate to everybody else is, you get to them first and talk to them. Go over those programs, go over what you're thinking, what your development is, et cetera, what your vision is for the city. Because we're not trying to bump up. We want to be a partner, with the state. We still do on economic development issues on a lot. But it's just, man, that's got to stop. We got to have that partnership. And I don't care if anybody's R&D or whatever in between, It's like an old constitutional law professor told me, don't ever run for the school board or the city council. I said, why? It's way too close to the people. And that's true. Y'all reflect the community attitudes. I mean, you don't come up with this stuff just out of the air. It's somebody that comes before here and talks to you and tells you about it. And I think that's what we need with, y'all are fortunate, with you and probably whoever takes the place in the Senate race. So hopefully that's helpful.
It is. I think though that's one of the advantages of at the city level not running a partisan campaign.
Oh, yeah.
Is because it's very simple and it's very true to say I represent everybody. Right. D or R, black or white. I mean, it doesn't matter. And with the overall political issues that we're having, there's already enough division. I don't need to be divided against my neighbor.
That's
right? Because of a political affiliation that I have. I mean, really, that doesn't have anything to do with running a city well. So
We used to
my
say the same people that elect you elect your state folks too. To a certain extent, true. But to a certain extent also, it's a different bunch in some of these primaries, whether it's RD. And, everybody comes in and votes in y'all's. So you kind of have to do things to keep the folks together, the city moving. Hard job.
Thank you.
I can say one thing. I really enjoy your emails.
Oh, good.
They're succinct. They get to the heart,
Advertising.
easily read. So I really appreciate that very much.
Yeah, and if y'all have any questions, of course, Brandon and our staff do a great job. And just let us know if we can elaborate on something or help on a particular. Try to keep everybody up because this stuff moves. And this, starting Saturday, it's gonna move real quickly down there. So we gotta watch for the next couple of months. So,
Good.
good. Thank you.
Sounds like
It's good to
question.
hear about the golf course. Yeah, played junior high golf up there. See y'all.
Thanks, sir.
Thanks. Catch 35.
Okay. I don't blame you.
Thank y'all.
All right, moving on to item number 3 is to receive a presentation on the City of Temple's administrative space standards. Ms. Myers and Ms. Matt.
Thank you, Mayor. So with the multiple new facilities that the city has in the design phase and in the planning phase as part of our capital and business plan, one thing that we wanted to make sure that we were doing is being very thoughtful and intentional about how we're designing those spaces and making sure that we have the right mix of space, but that we're not overbuilding or underbuilding, and that we really just have a good process in place to helping us establish what we need in terms of space for our new facilities. So we've commissioned a study to develop some administration space standards. And I wanted you all to receive a presentation and update on the work of our consulting team. Belinda, do you have any introduction you want to provide, or would you like me to introduce the team?
Well, I'd be happy to, but you're welcome to also.
Go ahead, Belinda.
Okay. Well, I've been working a lot lately with Brian Seville and Shelley Whitby with facility programming and consulting. They're actually out of their San Antonio office. They also have an Austin office in Houston area, but very unique services that they provide. So, and I'm really excited to have this as a guide. We've already started using it. on a couple projects, and I'm excited, I'm really happy to see the results of it. So I'll let them present. I think Shelley's gonna present this afternoon.
Are you okay if I take this off, just so you can hear a little better? So I'm Shelley Whitby. Nice to meet everyone. We have had the pleasure, I'd say the past couple months of working, well, we've met with many of you in this room. We've toured facilities. We've talked to representatives from kind of each department to see where, as we go on to plan future space, we could have some space savings. We can make sure we plan for growth in your city as you are continuing to grow. So what I have for you today is kind of a summation of the larger packet that you got. So we're not going to go through every page and every type of space that's in your packet. I'm just going to hit some highlights just so we can kind of see where we're going with this and see if you have any questions or discussion points. So I think it's really important to just know that so far we've only really kind of dove into the administrative space standards. So you'll find in here, you know, for typical positions, for coordinators, for managers, for administrative staff, for meeting type spaces. This doesn't go into if we built a new, you know, maintenance facility, how many bays would we need? These are just kind of general standards. And I think guidelines is a really good word for this also, because there will always be things that don't fit into a box and that we need to make, you know, exceptions for. But in general, if we can all be on the same page about what type of space we want, we can build more equitable facilities as we go by in the future, so that a manager in this building and a manager in this building have the same type of space. And also then if you want to reconfigure or move groups, it's much more flexible as all of the space is similar in content. So here's an overview of the spaces we did. I know this is pretty small. We're going to go into some more in-depth sheets as we go, but so we really looked at different sizes of private offices, different sizes of open workspace. We looked at some shared general spaces such as lobby waiting areas, different sizes of conference and huddle meeting spaces, workroom, break rooms. We want to make sure we have some file storage, and we've also included a lactation room. It's kind of becoming more of a state standard as we kind of design new facilities to have that quiet space. So guiding principles. When we thought about this, we thought, okay, what should these spaces have that not all our spaces nowadays have, that can also bring, you know, a better work environment as we go forward? Sometimes standards are hard because they give us less square footage in the office than we may want, but what can we get in return? So some of the things are, we can have glass partitions. Think about putting offices in the interior and open spaces on the outside. And if we have glass partitions, light comes through the outside, everyone has light, everyone gets, you know, kind of the benefits of the natural daylight and space. So think about using more glass. It also makes things seem larger, makes things seem less closed off and unapproachable, just kind of makes a more friendly work environment. Equity for all employees, kind of what the standards are trying to get at. You know, we have spaces by position, not space because I've been here 20 years and you've been here 5, and I have this office because I was here first and I'm not moving out. Also talking about having open work areas. Kind of hard for some folks who have been in offices to go to more of an open workspace. But it can be a great change. It can help with collaboration. It can help with the space you need. And if we provide such things as huddle or meeting spaces at a good ratio, so every, you know, 5 or 6 open workspaces, we have a huddle room, we have focus rooms, we have somewhere they can go make a private call, we have somewhere they can go meet with 2 or 3 people. It tends to help and make it kind of a neighborhood or an environment of spaces and not just a workstation we put in a corner. Space should be inviting and the space should be flexible. One of the best things about standards is the space becomes more flexible. We now have a standard size office. We don't have, oh, they needed 130, they needed 150, they needed 160. We now have much more standard spaces. And if, say, you know, utilities group in a building A addition, say they outgrow that space, and solid waste moves in. So if solid waste moves in, which I know will not happen, they're getting really too, but if solid waste moved in, they would move into the offices the exact same way they are. It wouldn't be, oh, well, I should have more space because in our department we have this. So it's really just about creating equity and flexibility and really in the long run savings for you as a city. So here's a typical office. So for a standard office, we would say this is for a manager, an attorney, a foreman, positions of the like. So anyone who is overseeing individuals, who has a managerial role,
who needs that private space for phone calls, consult, quiet space. There is a variety, as you can see from the pictures. They can have solid glass walls. You can have executive furniture in a space this size. You can have easy, flexible furniture in a space this size. But it's just really providing the environment and kind of what it could be. So here's more of a typical workspace. And I provided kind of some different views of how this could work. So this is a little bigger of a workspace. This is for someone who has guests that come into their space. Or if you look at the top image, it's for someone who collaborates with their neighbor. Like we have a little work table in the middle. We work on projects together. It makes sense for us to be together. Whereas the image below kind of shows them more separated with more distance and more space in the same amount of square footage. This would be more of a standard size office space, an administrative assistant, a tech, someone who's in the field who just comes into the office for a little bit in the morning. More of a standard space. It could be you, it could be an L, they could face each other, they could be separated, they could have partitions between them, or they could be open depending on the type of work and what they need to do. It's more about the size and the uniformity of kind of the furniture and the system, not necessarily how it's set up. So typical conference room. This would be a large conference room. It would be very similar to what we're standing in right now. So this would be, an executive type level conference room. We would suggest in any building you construct, you have at least one or two of these for everyone to share. They don't have to be assigned. It doesn't have to belong to this group as a conference room. But having a variety of meeting spaces throughout the building allows everyone to be able to use things, and it also cuts down on ownership of spaces, which makes all the spaces have better utilization overall. So here's what we're calling a huddle, a focus, a breakout room, just that space where if we need to have 2 or 3 of us, we need to have a discussion. We want it to have technology. We want it to be flexible. Let's go in here. Let's pull it up on the screen. Let's close the door. We need, the 2 of us need some head down quiet time as opposed to out in our open space where a bunch of other people are talking. This is also somewhere you could bring someone from the public if we needed to have a conversation. Glass is great in this situation because people can see there's something going on in there, but they don't hear what's going on. They know it's in use. And also if you're bringing outside individuals, someone else can see what's going on, just in case things arise later. This is kind of a unique one. So I noticed when we toured most of your facilities, every group has a department / break room / refrigerator in the corner. It's just happenstance. You have a historic building, and over time, it's just what happened. It's a historical accident of how your space is laid out. But we're suggesting, so for a floor like this size of a space, maybe we have one large workroom, break room standard. Copiers can be configured to not print till you hit the button, you enter a code. Things can still be private, but we can get a lot more efficient space by sharing, cabinetry and how we store things and creating less small spaces, but one much bigger functional space. And then a break room. You have a really nice example just down the hall that we have seen, but having a break room, a couple in a large building or one per floor if you have a multi-floor building, then having that space where employees can go take a break, eat lunch. Natural light's great. They often have a television in them. It's just where they can go to get away and to kind of have quiet time and just really just take a break. So these are kind of spaces we think would be standard amongst where we'd like to lead you guys in a direction. Like I say, I do really feel like they're more guidelines. Not everything fits into every box, but if you have a start, it helps in the process. It can help you to know, okay, we need 10 offices, we have 10 managers, that's this much square footage, it's this much a square foot, okay. We better be planning for this much of a budget in 2 years because we need 50 of this size. Instead of, hey, let's have one of these, and they need 20 square feet because they have an extra desk they're gonna put in there. It's really about helping you to move forward as you plan future buildings. Renovations are a little different. We have the historic post office. We would never suggest you go in there and tear up the beautiful balcony, to make more efficient space. But you can still employ the standards with the space you have and a few changes in those kind of situations. So just kind of a little quick overview of what we've done. Belinda, everyone in this room has been greatly helpful in creating these standards. We've met with most of you a few times. We've toured all the facilities. So really just want to know your thoughts, what you think about this, if you have questions about it.
It's like we're trying to cram more and more people. That's what this presentation's about.
No,
right?
it's not.
We're not building a city hall. Standardization, I think, is that something that is used much now? Is kind of standardized office space or,
In our facility?
yeah, I mean, just kind of, well, where are we? We're not here, right? Sort of where are we now? Not even close.
No, I mean, historically, I mean, many of our structures, you know, like this building, like the historic post office, they're either historical in nature or, we often adapt to older buildings, reuse, you know, other
There
buildings.
happenstance.
So
Yeah.
we haven't had a formal program in the past, but as we prepare to invest significantly in our facilities over the next few years, so think the service center expansion, the new solid waste facility, the renovations to the first floor of this building, our airport, you know, needs, potential programs out there, maybe a new city hall, you know, who knows? So we want to make sure that as we make those investments, that we're doing that in a way that's thoughtful and intentional and not just, you know, one building having 400 square feet offices and the other having 50. We also want to be cognizant and good stewards of our tax money so that if a facility, we don't overbuild, but we also don't underbuild because both ultimately can cost us more money in the long run. If you build more space than you need or you configure it in a way that doesn't work as well for you, then you're potentially overspending. At the same time, if you build something that you outgrow in 2.5 years, that's also not an ideal circumstance. And I think Tracy likes to say, and I would agree that, you know, over the years of this building, we've done so many renovations and different office, you know, just kind of carving things up to make room for more and more people that we probably could have built a brand new facility, but that's just the nature of, you know, of a historic building. So I would say historically, we haven't had any space standards, but it's also been. Is the service center the last new building what am I missing?
Our utility business office.
But that was a redid.
Okay, brand new
Fire stations.
Fire stations.
police stations.
Police station.
So it's been, you know, a couple of decades
Yeah.
since we actually built a facility from the ground up.
But this is a good foundation to start from.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you did that.
Thank you. We agree.
So really, you know, once you've just squeezed everything you can out of what you've got,
You gotta do something
you
else.
gotta make a decision. Yeah. Do we build another wall?
Do we divide that office by 2?
Right.
How do you double deck those offices?
Yep.
Yeah.
Nice clear story space.
Convert a closet or copy room to
Yeah,
office.
I've seen a few in this floor up here. I would say, although you do get some space, I want to say space savings. It's not necessarily that you should build less, you're just building it more thoughtfully. Like so we were gonna build this much square footage. That means we have 2 growth offices because now we've made them all 140 instead of 180 and 160. And yes, we made some workspaces, but in return, we got beautiful break room with outdoor space. You know, we got huddle, we got nice glass space, we got light, we got some trade-offs, not necessarily less space, just
In other words,
more
they came in-
functional
They
space.
came into the 21st century.
Yes, that's a nice way to say it. This floor is lovely. I mean, I've been to some other facilities, but you know, we like to say where we work, it's a historical accident. You obtained this building from history, you did something, someone else came along and did something, and you are where you are because of history, not because you started from the ground up. And you've done great with what you have, and it is harder to renovate, but there are still things we can do in renovations to help implement kind of an equity, even if they're not we would never say, hey, tear that office down because it's 150 and we're gonna make them all 120. So we would say, okay, this one's 150. It's in a perfect spot. Let's make the next one's the correct standard size. And yes, we have one larger, but we're not gonna go back and tear things out for no good reason. But you can still implement them in phases and in sections as you renovate space. Like the first floor, for example, is a great space. It's pretty chopped up, but if you take out some of it, you get a nice big open space and you still have offices and it still works, but you gain some light and some movement and it's less of a maze. So you can still do things. It's just not every space will conform, and that's why it's more of a guide. It definitely is easier to implement in new construction.
So is there a plan going forward to implement this building by building or?
So as we begin our construction projects, we are reviewing our plans with our consulting team. So we do, I believe we've engaged them for first floor as well as Service Center A and have gotten their recommendations or close, at least their initial recommendations. I think we might be all the way. I'm looking at Belinda because she's going to give me the latest information. So
And I'm between the two of them.
If you want City Hall, it's on the next slide. Shelley doesn't know that, but City Hall's on the next slide.
Do you want it?
Oh my goodness.
So this is actually what we pulled together using the standards. Kind of the yellow space is where we're going to be renovating. It's a consolidated suite with the Planning and Development Department along with the City Secretary's office. So it's going to be one shared kind of customer service station when you come down the ramp. That's where they'll be greeted and helped with any permitting needs or with any birth certificate, death certificate, anything they need that way. You can see behind them, those are workspaces. They're not offices, again, per the standards. If you know Wendy, that would be, well, actually it's Wendy that isn't here anymore with us, so I apologize. But Jana's desk is behind, so kind of their division is all together there. The back side of Jana's office out into the open space there, we ended up creating workspaces for the building inspectors along with their supervisor kind of in that workspace.
You know, it's points.
So this is the existing ramp where you come in on the first floor. This currently you walk into here and the counter faces this direction and it's behind kind of a locked door. So this is really just opening it up so you could use this for more public waiting. It gives more space to have more private conversations. If it's something with public records that you're not comfortable sharing, we've created some little meeting space over here where you can take the public and meet them there to have that private conversation without going back into the workspace. So once you're in the workspace, this is very open, and yes, these are workspaces to the front glass for telling, but there's a good, 7 feet back here. There's lots of circulation space. There's space for them to have the copiers and the printers, and there's a workspace over here. And this is really kind of the city secretary section. And then this is part of the planning and development group. But over here we have the inspectors. We have a shared break room for the whole floor, for the whole, anyone who wants to go down there. And then, so this is kind of that section. And then up here, we have more of the planning. So all of this in white is not being touched. So just the yellow is renovated space. So we were able to have, I can't print all the way up, able to get the planners. Some of them are in offices, and then this is the historic post office. This is Dan, right, and Ayana, who are currently at the post office, are coming over. And then we still have this large space up here where they can have open collaboration meetings. We can have work tables, and in the future, if we grow, we can have more workspaces. We also have planned several huddle spaces throughout. So they can have private meetings, they can have conversations. If they need to bring someone in to go over plans, they can do that. So we were able, I think, to get 8 or 9 more spaces, huddle rooms, offices within doing this plan from the original that had everyone in an office. So we have 8 or 9 more people spaces moving forward.
Plus a very nice break room, which
Yeah, plus some shared space for, we have a new unisex, correct size ADA restroom. We have a nice, really large, I think it's 330 square foot break room for everyone on that floor to be able to go and have a space. Huddle space, we addressed they were concerned about having private conversations if someone brought their family and maybe English wasn't the first language and they had a translator and we're having to talk out loud about birth and death certificates. So we've created, 2 private spaces where they could take individuals to have that conversation so it wasn't out in the public. And then this space is large enough that we could put the election booths here instead of the chairs. to do the election.
I should probably know this, but how big is this building?
You know, I don't have plans for the whole building.
It is 38,000 square feet total. The space we're renovating here is about 55.
It's like 6,000, oh, so 5,500, yeah.
Is there sort of an industry standard? And I know it depends on what the industry is, but is there sort of an industry standard with person, per employee per square foot? Or,
So yes and no. There is, depending on if you want everyone in offices or if you're following kind of the new current model that's more workspace and office space. So a typical ratio for some other cities that we recently worked with, they'll try to do about 80-20, 20% offices, 80% workspace. This isn't exactly that, which is fine. But that comes out to about 100, I think it's like 150 to 180 square foot of person. That includes everything. So that's, the restroom, the break room, the mailroom, the shared workroom. So you aim to be around 180 square foot of person who will be in that space. Like I say, it does depend. If you do more offices as opposed to work, if you don't aim for that 70, 30, 80, 20, the number goes up.
And having something like a council chambers in a building is obviously gonna change that too.
eat up some square
That's
feet?
not a typical,
Yeah.
that's not.
We wouldn't count a
typical-
conference center, if you had a floor of conference and meeting space, or you had the like the chamber that's in this lower building, we wouldn't consider that part of that square footage per person.
Okay.
And that is too, that's a guideline. It's harder in an older, smaller renovated building, but I think you would be pretty close there. I haven't done it, but.
Will you even put more glass within the spaces?
Yes, ma'am, that is part of the plan. They're looking, so any kind of where you see this thinner line, so they're envisioning this would be a glass wall, this would be a glass wall, and this one, so that, light from this office can come through, trying to put the workspaces by the window so they get light. And then having windows here so they can see out, they can see what's going on. The same with where it says Nancy up here on the top, that office, putting some glass in it, and any new walls, we're trying to do that. We're not renovating walls that aren't being touched in this plan that are still white. That's not planned to have more glass put in them. But yes, as we move forward, we've been discussing that too at the Service Center and at Solid Waste, having more glass, more windows so you can see in, see what's going on. It really is, as things continue, it is a safety thing too. When you have employees going in to talk to other employees, be able to have glass and, kind of know what's going on with the door closed still, so.
I do want to credit, this has been a collaborative effort on pulling this together. Definitely
Yeah.
Shelley and Brian helped us a lot, but Randy Stumberg
Yes.
with MRB Group he's the architect on this project. So
Yes,
it's been
he has
outstanding
done a ton of work.
working as a team to pull
We've
this
just
off.
helped, just discussed and talked and kind of worked together to get what we think could be the best plan for you guys.
Very good. Council, anything else? Appreciate the effort from all parties. It's a lot of work. You've already got other things you're doing, obviously.
She just sits over there in the AC building.
We've talked a long time about, this building, being maximized, and this is one more iteration of it. Right? So, yeah, I appreciate the thoughtfulness from the consultant and from staff very much.
Thank you.
What
If you
else?
have other questions, let us know. Does anyone else have questions or specific thoughts? Like I say, every space is in your pocket and kind of technology. We did work with Belinda about, okay, managers should have some type of video screen in their office where they can do Zoom calls, and huddle rooms should have technology, but all of that, like I say, is in there. If you have questions or you guys as a group think, hey, we wouldn't want this in this space, we want it in these spaces, we are here to help you, so just let us know.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
All right, as we discussed earlier, we're going to, we're going to skip item 4. Evidently, Mr. Parker's not able to be here today, so we'll move on to item number 5 is to discuss the proposed.
I'm sorry, Mayor, Mr. Chandler is here and prepared to present. It's just the airport. That's not-
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. I wrote skip beside the whole item, so.
All right, well, good afternoon, everybody. Pleased to be able to present the third quarter status for planning and development. And so just starting with some of our accomplishments from April through June. Couple TxDOT funded projects that you all are obviously aware of, but we can't get enough mileage out of these projects. The SH-95 turn lane project and phase 1 of the Georgetown Railroad Trail project. So really excited about those. Also, just the successful transition for our 4 boards and commissions. You know, Planning and Zoning, Main Street Advisory Board, Zoning Board of Adjustment, which of course now also includes Building Board of Appeals, which makes complete sense. And then the Historic Preservation Board. So brand new or reinstated board. And so taking the policy and with, you know, tremendous guidance from and help from Jana and Kathy and her team and Bren, and just in terms of the orientation. So I think the transition has been good for those 4 boards and excited to work with them. Also, Prairie Ridge tree replanting project, and y'all are probably somewhat aware of this. Of course, Prairie Ridge is behind Tractor Supply Company. And of course, being one of the first TMED residential developments, we ran into a conflict between underground utilities and the trees between the sidewalk and the street. And so just working proactively with the developer and with the builders, you know, with help once again from legal and other key members of our team, to hire a consultant to relocate the trees that were already there, that were over the underground, the sewer, remove those and replant them in public spaces. So working very closely with parks, planting some of those trees along the Friars Creek Trail, Silverstone Park, South Temple Park, so that we certainly wouldn't want to get rid of that asset. Let's put them to public use, and replanting new red buds that will be smaller, but certainly look especially great during March when they start to turn color, and having that consistent and cohesive look for TMED. So that's complete. We're excited about that. And then this is just one that I think is of interest, that just, you know, my time alone over that previous 3 months involved in 40 different pre-development meetings. And so I think it's just another indicator of the interesting projects and the level of interest in real estate in Temple. You know, these are lots of commercial and industrial projects or in downtown that really require my attention. And so just I thought an interesting note. Also downtown related events, starting with the Imagine the Possibilities tour, which under Dan Kelleher's leadership in Main Street, had another version of that this year back in May. Last year, of course, it was canceled due to the pandemic, but had a successful one in 2019. And so in 2019, I believe we had 17 different building or owners or spaces downtown that you know, featured plans and designs you know, for their projects kind of in the core. We had 24 this year, and so I think it's a successful event, and you know, just to be able to showcase what is possible downtown, what is planned or designed, and just getting to interact with the public in that way. Also, in terms of comprehensive plan implementation, I Mayor, I'm always careful about calling it comp plan because immediately she compensation. So comprehensive plan. There are 170 initiatives for the plan that, of course, council adopted back in November. And we've been a little slow in getting ramped up for the implementation, but I still thought, okay, well, let's take a look at where we are. And of the 170 initiatives, 40 of them, many of them are ongoing, but we still have started or at 40 of those. So almost a quarter of them have either started or finished. And I think about 39 of them have started and about one of them is complete. So, but just for the record. Also, our mobile food unit permit process. So, key aspect of the amendments to Chapter 14. Of course, where the rubber meets the road is the permitting process and ensuring that is efficient and improved from the way it had previously worked. So putting that permitting system into the online, MyGovernment Online software, that is still working out the final details of that, but we've had some of the new paper copies that are being used to finalize essentially the template. And so working with IT, we're very close on that. But ultimately, that'll allow for concurrent review of the permit process before, you'd have these small business owners coming into, Jana's office and getting the permit application, shuttling it over to us and planning, and then key folks who, should see it weren't necessarily in the past. And so with Chapter 14, this will really improve that process. So looking forward to that. Also, an American Planning Association Texas chapter submittal or application for a comprehensive plan for awards that will be given at the state conference in Fort Worth this year in early November. And so working with our consultant HAF associates as well as key departments of marketing and communications and performance excellence to get that submitted. I feel like we got a pretty good chance on that. It's usually very competitive, but feel good about it. And then also for Texas Downtown Association award submittals, for downtown, including the Imagine Downtown neighborhood plan event, which I have referenced up there. And I saw some of you there. Let's see, I guess, when was that? Back in June, maybe that was May, but no, I think that was June. Either way, that was for the downtown neighborhood plan. And it really showcased not only Santa Fe Plaza, but the other improvements that have occurred, including the First Street streetscape improvements and the businesses there, the yard food truck court, the Santa Fe Market Trail. I mean, I think we had about at least 200 visitors, and the primary purpose was to get input and have downtown stakeholders take the survey, but it really was a celebration of downtown. And so that was one of the awards that was submitted for downtown event. And also just to follow up on neighborhood planning, 3 different neighborhood plans during that quarter, either completed and approved, like the Midtown plan. Downtown plan is at 90% development. And so we anticipate adoption in September. TMED neighborhood plan is well underway. And so we're finishing up the community engagement portion of that. Two big community events last month, and then just recent completion of the survey input process as well. So next 90, deeper dive into the comprehensive plan implementation, also corporate campus rezoning. And so prior to the standards that would codify the master plan, you all are likely to see a plan development rezoning. So the first in that area that would in order to be responsive to the development, rather than saying, hey, hold up until we adopt these standards, to kind of use that development with the plan development district in, response to the timing of the developer and the needs, yet incorporating elements from the comp plan that can essentially test the code before it actually gets adopted. Bell County Memorandum of Understanding for plating in our extraterritorial jurisdiction. Had a good meeting yesterday with David and other key staff. So under David's leadership, we're making good progress and plan on taking a new set of standards that, of course, we're working very closely with the county on that make sense for both communities, both jurisdictions, and are essentially a one-stop shop for developers and surveyors and applicants for plating. So they don't, much like the mobile food units, they don't have to shuttle between the city and the county for approval from both. Got agreed upon standards that can go to one jurisdiction or the other and get it done. Also, just continuing to look at our strategic investment zone process and improving that with, guidance from finance and legal. I think that's going well. And right now we have a little lull in the application process. So that gives us a little time to fine tune that. Future annexations, we got 229 acre Daniel tract. And if that sounds familiar, it's because part of the Daniel tract has already been annexed. And so this is the piece that was on hold due to the railroad, adjacency of the railroad. And so now we're able to move forward with that. And then what is likely to come, maybe it's not in the next 3 months, but it appears to be imminent, is a 30 acre Bailey tract across from Lake Belton High School. So obviously right on the edge of our city limits for future mixed use development. And then mobility master plan, just completion of the existing conditions part of that 18-month process as well. And so this is not a guarantee to happen necessarily in the next 90, but I thought you might be interested to see two buildings that many of us drive by very frequently and wonder what's going on with them. First one being at 1401 South First Street. You can see that on the left next to, I forget the name of what Surplus Warehouse has become, but yes, thank you. And so you may notice it's under renovation. And so that's good news because it's been a shell building that has sat there for at least as long as I have been here. Finish out for a fitness gym, and I believe they'll have an additional retail space. So in the heart of T-Med, and so that's exciting. And then on the right, what we refer to as the old Ralph Wilson Youth Club gym, very visible at I-35, and you can see a lovely building that it is. Okay, and so on the left, you can see they've repainted the building. They're still working on it for 1401 South First Street for the gym. But on the right, and this is something that would go through the permitting process, has not yet, but because for the old Ralph Wilson Youth Club, it's in the I-35 corridor overlay. This would be for self-storage and small offices, climate-controlled self-storage with internal access. So not the overhead doors. This would be really a high-end self-storage project. And you can see in the back side of that is the actual gym building. So a really good example of utilizing existing building, existing infrastructure, making it look really good, turning it into something that will improve that corridor. And it's allowed by right within the I-35 overlay, which is why you all haven't seen it. And just looking quickly at permit status, total permits, you can see in the 2020 is in green, of course, and 21 in blue. And in April, we had a record number just of total permits, 619. Recent months, it's settled down a little bit more to normal levels of permit issuance. But when you compare last year to this point this year, still looking at a 15% increase in total permits from 2019 or 2020 to 21. And just, similarly for single family housing starts or new single family home permits, we had a record in April, but overall we're about 15% ahead of where we were this time last year. And just some key performance indicators, planning and zoning approved cases. 13 zoning cases during that quarter compared to 8 during that same period last year. Plats, right on target, 20 this year during that time and 20 last year. No variances, means everyone's building to code. That's great. We'd love to hear that. And new downtown businesses, you can see the list there. And so exciting, certainly quarter for downtown. And then coming soon, Waco Cha Tea at 11 North Main. We had a pre-development meeting with them. They've applied for permit. They're going to rebrand the name for this location since we are not Waco, and they certainly recognize that and want to be a key member of the community. And so if you've never had bubble tea, they will have Asian bubble tea, which is one of their specialties. Tapioca balls. It's like drinking gummy bears without the choking hazard. And also Weird Dough Bakery and Sandwiches, a new owner of the Unincluded Clubs building on 6th Street. And so that's proposed to go in, and they're excited about the timing. So both of these businesses want to be in by the end of the year. To cater to construction workers that inevitably will be working on the Hahn, Arcadia, Sears building projects. So big welcome to those folks. And that's all I've got, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Brian, your slide about your MOU with Bell County, we're talking about development standards and ETJ, et cetera.
Just the plats, just for ETJ plats that are submitted. We have I want to say 2002 MOU. That was the most recent version of the document, and it's clearly no longer relevant. So this has been a long but productive process in collaborating with them and making sure that we agree upon standards within the ETJ that make sense.
Yeah, we're not lowering our standards to meet the county?
No, sir. And going actually standard by standard, everything from right-of-way dedication to, lots fronting on a public street to, being able to convey property to a family member without requiring platting. So it's not, yes, it's on a case-by-case basis, and generally it's the more restrictive is going to apply with some exceptions where it makes sense.
Thank you very much.
There's a few standards that the county, you would consider them higher than our current standards, and then a few vice versa. So they're working through that long list.
One of the biggest issues is, and I don't hear about it a lot, but one complaint I hear with people that are, kind of in the ETJ, near the city limits, et cetera, is the lack of either the county or the city taking responsibility and ownership and accountability for certain issues. Like I got a call from someone on Hartrick about a drainage issue. And she said she had talked to the county, and she talked to, and each one of them were punting it back and forth.
Right.
So is any of those kind of situations being tightened up? Or is that just kind of the nature of being out in ETJ?
I think indirectly, yes. I mean, it's a good point to just make sure that we're looking at from that perspective too. But I think that will significantly improve just because it'll be clear who is responsible, you know, in terms of which standard applies and for that particular plat. You know, that, hey, if the infrastructure, if the county is the one who has to accept the public infrastructure for drainage, then that'll be well documented. And so moving forward, it'll be clear who answers that question.
I'm assuming that there are good, accurate maps of all that both county and city has access to. Because I've just never understood why, of course, I don't deal with that every day either.
Right.
I've never understood why something like that is such a, you know, can be a question. This lady said she'd been, you know, bothering with that for a week. And
Yeah.
is the county looking at something different than the city and vice versa?
I mean, part of it is yes. I mean, the standards are different.
No, I'm talking about the actual maps.
The actual maps.
Of who is
The maps are
accountable.
the same. And so some of it is just making sure that the public knows where to go.
Yeah.
I think on an issue like that, you may also have a situation where someone's complaining that a development that's within the city is causing drainage issues on their property that's not in the city. So it's not so much where's the line of where the drainage is or where the
Yeah,
ETJ
that's
starts
true.
and ends. That's very well established, but it's, it can actually just be a property owner, you know, like a civil issue between if someone within the city is causing, you know, an
Yeah,
issue to
I didn't
somebody
think
else.
about that.
But neither, in neither case would that necessarily be the governing bodies, you know,
Right.
or the city or the county. So I don't know about that particular case.
Yeah, no, but I hadn't thought about that aspect. That makes sense. There's always more to it, right? It's not just that easy. Okay. I'm assuming at some point we'll get some clarification or presentation on that MOU, because that is something that I'm curious about. I think everyone would like to see that.
So right now, we're tentatively looking at first meeting in October for first reading.
Yeah.
And so workshop, we could do and, you know, second meeting in September, if that sounds good.
I think just more information, you know, as y'all move through that process, you know, and obviously the sooner the better, just so we all get an understanding of that. Because there's been talk about tightening up the standards coming out of the county into the city along the major corridors, you know, and if that's relevant or are those standards going to be tighter along the entrances and, you know, along the major roads in and out versus other places, or just sort of what's the strategy?
Sure.
Also.
Yeah, we'll absolutely bring that to you all in a workshop.
Council, anything else for Mr. Chandler?
My work, good work. Thank you.
It's fun. We got great teams to address it.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, yes, ma'am. Yes.
All right. Item number 5 is to discuss the proposed fiscal year 2022 business plan, including but not limited to the proposed fiscal year 2022 annual budget, as well as the certified tax roll. Ms. Bernard.
There we go. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Just wanted to quickly go over tonight on or this afternoon on the 5 o'clock agenda. There's 4 items related to the tax rate, the tax roll, the levy, and setting the tax rate. And I wanted to take just a few minutes to dive deeper into a certified tax roll. We did receive that like a week or 2 ago. The county certified the roll at 6.6 billion. I won't read the number out in total. The certified taxable value broken down into categories. You have City of Temple at 5.3 billion. You add back the free or frozen taxable of 705 million to come up with total adjusted value of 6,086 million. The $377,000, and that represents a 9.3% increase in values compared to the previous year.
Is that 13% increase due to increased property values that don't get taxed?
Correct. Or not, our taxes, our taxable property that becomes frozen.
Right, because the owner ages in.
Right. That's said better. And then that backs, you break those down into those three categories: City of Temple, non-reinvestment zone, the frozen values, and then the tax increment district, or RZ. And the RZ values increased by 7.46%. Moving on, I just wanted to look at, compare this year's growth, and this excludes the reinvestment zone, just the city, or non-RZ. You had the 9.3% or 9.30%. Last year it was 14.26. You can see the year before that, 10.82. But the last 3 years have far exceeded our average annual increase. Yes.
That last one, shouldn't it be shorter?
Good Lord, yeah.
Just,
It's actually measuring the dollars on the left-hand side.
oh, I see. I'm sorry. Thank you. Gotcha.
Thank you, Wendell. Because it did
That's
grow.
an amazing growth.
It is.
Yeah, especially when you look back, 2013 to 19, just kind of plodding along. Ooh.
Yes, just to speak to what Bryn said quickly. The growth, the bars represent the total value of the property, assessed value of taxable property. But the growth, the percentage up there is the percent growth from year to year.
Sorry.
You were about to knock me off my feet.
Sorry.
No, that's good. Good. Check those. Looking at total market value, just what's the composition of our tax base in the market value, not taxable value. I think there's a little bit more shift towards single family compared to prior years, but it's 47.7% single family. We're close to 33% commercial, industrial, and utilities. Totally exempt properties, which schools, hospitals, cities, other not-for-profits, 9.44%. Multifamily, 6.26%, and land and lots at 3.8%. Again, that's the pie of, or the composition of the total market value of the tax base. There we go. The next thing I wanted to look or drill into just a little bit deeper is looking at the new value of property that's added to the tax base. And I show over the past 4 years, and this is represented in dollars. In FY22, we had $357 million worth of new value added to the property tax roll. And you can see that that's the highest in the last 5 years. In the next few slides, I want to drive down into FY20, or drive down to each, show what FY22 new value looks like. Most of it single family housing. This year we had a large amount of totally exempt property coming on, part of that new value. Our commercial, industrial, utilities, and then at 13.5, multifamily 3.63. And the next slides, I want to drill down in each one of those categories and show you what it looked like over the past 5 years. So single family, $198 million this year. And again, look at the dollars for the past 5 years. Significant growth there in single family. Looking at multifamily, again, FY21, you had more value added than 22, but still significant add there. This looks at commercial, industrial, and utilities. This is new value added. And this would exclude reinvestment zone properties. And our reinvestment zone values are, it's personal property related to taxpayers in the reinvestment zone. Said another way, it excludes real reinvestment zone, real property improvements. Looking at land and lots, you see their big decrease from 21 to 22. I think that has to do possibly with inventory of lots and the fact that those lots went into be residential, went into actual homes. And again, I tell you, there was a big chunk of totally
I'm
exempt
sorry.
property added this year.
Would you go back one?
Yeah.
Explain on the right-hand side that fiscal year 21 land lots and then such decrease to 22.
Because they're
Is
no
that because they
longer,
were built upon and converted? What is that?
they became
Is that
a,
right?
in FY 21, they were a lot, in FY 22,
Like platted available
Right.
lots.
and they became a single family dwelling in 22.
Which gives you some insight into that type of housing.
It does. It absolutely does. Wow.
And remember, this was as of FY 22, was as of January 1 of 2021.
So
Developers get a break on those lots too, as far as taxability of them.
So when you say that, does that mean, when you say that developers, never mind, I was trying to make a connection, I don't think it's there. So there's such a lack of lot inventory
At a point in
at a
time,
point, and so I guess that's where I was going next. Does anyone know if that's increasing? The inventory number is
Brian Lee.
increasing up?
as far as your plats
Well, I
or
mean-
lots, Bill,
Yeah, in terms of plats, we're
Yeah, maybe Marnie's the.
right up there.
They're running as fast as they can.
Yeah, I mean, that's,
Lots of being created, but,
I mean, that
As
is,
fast as you get them to prove them, they're
I
completely.
mean, you know, whenever you see it in the graph like that, you're like, holy, you know, that's a huge, what, a 900% decrease?
I wanted to, this might help. Because this was the end, but I had some slides in the back. Where I do the actual,
Actual numbers.
mhm. But that doesn't make sense, does it?
No, it doesn't.
It should, but it don't. Maybe that, no, I have to figure out what those numbers mean in the dollars, the relationship.
I mean, I realize that's a point in time, but I just wonder if that means there's gonna be a lull in building, lull in permits, you know, just because it's the lack of availability. No?
Again,
The current theme of all of our buildings are, they're afraid they're gonna run out of lots.
hard lumber, right?
Platted lots to build houses.
You agree?
yes, sir.
Yeah, I think that dollar amount's gotta have an error in it somewhere.
Or it might be the way we're reading the numbers.
Could be.
Yeah, but I will find out. But that is all I had on the tax roll, certified tax roll. And tonight, or in a few minutes, we'll go over the other items with the tax rate and for the meeting.
Not to beat this to death on these lots, is there a difference between you have a platted lot and so it's counted in the platted lots and lot inventory? It's under construction, not completed, hasn't actually got to where builders are buying them. And that's where your tax value comes after they have purchased. Just wonder if that's a bit of a timing issue.
There is, and I have to look up that I just, it could be.
Yeah.
And the fact that the way builders for a lot, there's some kind of a cap they get on the tax on the value. But I'll get that answer and get it out to you. Too.
It's like you're holding on to a bucking bronco in some ways. It's just happening so fast, you know? So you're, yeah.
It's all across the state.
Yeah.
Job security.
That's right. That's true.
For now.
Until it's not. Yeah.
Since we have a little bit of time, Tracy, I know I'm asking you to speak off the top of your head maybe, but where does Temple stand with the disabled, what's it called? The disabled veterans exemptions? Do we have a number on that
I do,
somewhere?
right here.
Right in our hand.
Yeah. I know that is a real issue for Colleen. I think their revenue is like $1 million short, or they don't get like over $1 million worth of revenue because of those exemptions.
I think it's a larger issue it's a big issue for Clean, but I think it's an even larger issue for Harker
Heights.
Heights because the legislation doesn't allow them to access the make whole money from the state. So they have an incredibly high percentage.
Is that because
They're not
Fort Hood is
contiguous.
not?
They have to be contiguous
To
to
the
Fort
base.
Hood, and there's no part of Harker Heights that is.
Right.
So they.
But they have a ton of veterans.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and they have a very high percentage of veterans who qualify for the exemption or a portion of the exemption.
So there is a make whole provision if you're contiguous to the base.
There's
Maybe not a make whole, but
Yeah.
make better.
And that's another
That's what they
problem,
call it.
right? It was, I think maybe the intention was whole, but it's not enough to make everyone whole.
Right.
So it still is harmful for Colleen, but it's
Mhm.
even more from a percentage standpoint,
Right.
it's more harmful for Harker Heights because they don't have the opportunity to get any funds back.
Hmm.
I mean, I think it's bad for both of them, but it's.
Sure.
Yeah.
Cove, same way. Cove isn't contiguous,
I thought-
or it just impacts it like it does in the way it does Colleen.
Just my math in my head for all the different categories of disabled vets. It totals of the exemptions are about $250 million, which that would equate to 1 something million in taxes.
2.5 cents, 3 cents, something like that.
Yeah, 1.6 million.
It's a fire truck.
Or yes, a big fire truck, ladder truck. Well, that's all I have there.
Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Counselor, staff, is there anything else that? Everybody okay? Very good. It is 4:40.